I think we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll repeat again, I hope you're all keeping healthy and safe in these times. Thank you so much for joining this Africa CEO Forum webinar on digital transformation in Africa. My name is Ravi Chatpar. I'm a partner at Dahlberg, a global advisory firm, and co-founder of Dahlberg Design, and I'll be your host and moderator today. For those of you who joined our first webinar a few weeks ago, we painted a very broad picture of what digital transformation in Africa meant and where we saw those opportunities. Today's the second webinar, and we're going to go deeper into one topic in particular, the topic of data. Over the course of the remaining webinars in this series, we'll also continue to go deeper on other topics relevant to digital transformation. So wanted to share a bit of a story to set the context. About 6 months ago, I was running a workshop on data-driven innovation in agriculture in East Africa. And this seems like a different era, the times when we could all get on planes and have 30 or 40 people in a hotel conference room for days at a time. But over the course of multiple days, it was interesting. Several CEOs of large companies and interesting startups all told me that there was no way that their companies would share their data with others, despite the various incentives we were discussing. At the same time, the various global and local research bodies were getting into heated arguments about who should own the data analytics engines, whether they should be running on public or private clouds. There was a lot of talk about innovation, experimentation, taking risks, but people were scared of actually trying things in the real world due to the lack of clarity on regulations, even when we had government ministries in the room who were present. We even had money committed from various donors and corporate budgets, right? And it was still a struggle to prioritize how to invest. And this is really the challenge that we're all facing. We've been talking about data-driven innovation for years. Many of you have been doing a lot of this already in your own companies or in the sectors that you work in. But we need to think much bigger when we talk about digital transformation across Africa. Increasingly, meaningful and sustainable innovation requires collaboration across ecosystems. It means working with new types of partners, trusting and sharing with organizations you may not know well, all while protecting the data of your customers and your citizens. So essentially, data-driven innovation is becoming more and more of a collective action problem. And this is why it's so hard to solve. So I hope we could explore this challenge and the various opportunities that it suggests together today. I'm very fortunate and honored to have a number of very impressive guests with deep expertise on this topic who are with me today to help us explore this further. I'll introduce them shortly, but before we do so, some quick housekeeping. You will have a chance to ask questions throughout the discussion, some of which we'll answer along the way, but most at the end. You'll see at the bottom right of your screen, a Zoom Q&A feature where you can share your thoughts. Thank you already to Sashi Mozunder. You asked us a question about what is preventing digital data growth in African countries. We'll answer that in a few different ways over the course of the conversation we have. You'll also have a chance to participate in a poll where you'll have a chance to vote and provide answers on some questions. So this will give us some inspiration and feedback on what you're thinking about, which will inform our conversation. And please feel free to reach out to us at any time if you need assistance or help. You could also tweet us on the hashtag ACF Digital Events. We'd love you to share some of the insights that you'll be hearing today or any ideas that are interesting to you. So I'd like to start by setting the stage by handing it over to Mr. Adam Abouzied. He is a partner at the Boston Consulting Group in the Casablanca office, specializing in public sector strategy, urban development, real estate, and retail and consumer sectors, and brings a tremendous amount of experience around how to use data for the purposes of innovation. So I'm going to hand it over to him to set the stage for our conversation.
Thank you very much, Ravi. So I would like to discuss with you some of our thoughts on digital transformation and profiting from data-driven innovation in Africa. So data-driven innovation is one of our key priorities at BCG. and it is one of the key priorities of all our clients across the African continent and globally. So one of the things that we do is that we try to gather a factual view of what is the level of maturity on this topic of this digital transformation or data-driven innovation across our clients. So we use a survey that we run across the globe with our key clients on where do they stand, where they can self-evaluate themselves on where do they stand in terms of digital transformation and the way that they use data. So it evaluates all the components from what is their strategy, what type of solutions are they applying at the core of their operations, how are they using their data, how evolved is their technology, and how are they integrating the digital ecosystems. What's new is that this survey, we ran it in Africa this year, and we ran it across 80 different players across the African market and across sectors. So on the following page, we can look at the results of where Africa stands in terms of data-driven innovation, digital transformation versus peers in other geographies. What we can see is that globally, Africa is behind other regions in terms of digital transformation and in terms of maturity, and this is visible across the key sectors. What we can also see is that in terms of financial institutions and telco players are among the most advanced in Africa in leveraging their data and getting value from their digital transformation. The question here is, okay, what do they do differently from others? Where do they actually excel? And that's what we can see on the following page. What they do differently is that they leverage a lot their data to develop solutions on data-driven marketing. So it's with African banks and African telcos where we can see solutions like cross-sell, upsell, that is data-driven, based on the client, based on their client data and based on the market data that is available. And we can see also in many countries, digital solutions to credit scoring and risk management that are successfully applied by those players. But what are the challenges facing those players to do more and facing the other sectors from profiting from their data-driven innovation? On the next page, we can see the typical challenges facing our clients and basically hindering their digital innovation. I will not go through every one of them. I will maybe pick 3 or 4 that are the most recurrent and to which I think most of the audience would relate. The first one would be the photo of the small jean pocket that nobody uses, and this is to illustrate the situation where we find a lot of our clients who invest in an analytics solution, but that nobody in the company is using it. And this is typical in all the African clients that have industrial operations, that have invested, for example, in predictive maintenance solutions. So there's very sophisticated algorithms that are running, but the operation maintenance teams are not using it and are not adopting it. The second photo that I would like to comment on is the one with the big mammoth and the mosquitoes over there. And that's also another typical situation where we find most of our clients, where they are running billions of small initiatives all over the place. Everywhere in the organization, there is a new idea for digital. There is a certain software being implemented. There's an algorithm being written, which is basically very fragmenting in terms of focus, and it's also very tiring for the organization, especially if the elephant in the room, which is the core activities that have potential for digital innovation, which would bring significant value to the company, is not being addressed with the appropriate focus. The third one that I would like to comment on is the photo with the banana in the fridge that is getting rotten at some point. And this is one of also of the typical situations where we find a lot of our clients where they say, okay, we do not have enough data, or we do not have enough good quality data. The reality is that if they look in details, they will be surprised by the amount of data they already have. It might not be fully exploitable directly. It might be on paper. It might be buried in certain legacy systems that needs to be extracted, cleaned, etc. But there's a lot to do with the data that you already have, and we've been through this situation in a lot of the projects that we do with our clients, where they get surprised by the amount of data they already have. The last one that I would like to comment on is the last one with the handcuff, which is basically the situation where a client is handcuffed by IP. And this is basically where we find a lot of our clients enticed by the off-the-shelf solutions that exist on the market to their issues. So they get propositions from software developers, from many types of players, telling them, okay, you want a geo-marketing solution, you want a data-driven marketing solution, a predictive maintenance solution, whatever. I mean, it's the case across all industries. And they tell them, okay, we have the answer for you. We have a software you can deploy in, I don't know, less than a couple of weeks, and it will be running, and it's cheap, and it will help you realize the value. What they do not realize here is that they do not own the IP to the solution. So you have not actually done a digital transformation, and what you actually don't get is that you are not actually the one who is profiting from your data. It's someone else who's getting access to the data, to the insights from the data. So the competitive advantage is shifting away from you. And what also happens is that whenever you find yourself in the situation where you want to scale up the solution, so you want to run it in another country, in another site of yours, you find yourself dependent on the developer that you use, because you did not develop your own solution that is creating value for your core business. Now, what is the recipe for success? What is the solution? And that's what's on the next page, where we basically where we show some of the recommendations that we give out to our clients. So basically, focus on profit and competitive advantage for the key solutions that you focus in, and focus your efforts on those unicorns. So there is no need to go to 15, 16, 20 use cases. Just focus on 2 or 3 to begin with that are big. Focus your resources there and try to get the value out of it by focusing on the change management aspects and not only the technology aspects of the solution. On the data part, we tell them, work with what you've got, look more closely and work with what you've got, and you'd also be surprised of the type of data that you can generate in a clean way once you implement a new solution within the organization. And the last one is beware of what is being proposed and what's off the shelf. There is a make or buy question that has to be addressed in this situation, and you have to make sure that when the solutions are addressing your core competitive advantage, is that it is you that is implementing the solution, and it is you that is owning the IP, and it is you that is covering the solution end to end. Thank you very much. This is what I wanted to share with you. Back to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Adam, for sharing these perspectives and some of these challenges and recommendations. I feel like some of your points about adoption, about fragmentation, about quality of data, about IP, all of these resonate quite a bit, I think, in a lot of the experiences that we've had. So I think these are really good inputs for our conversation. Thank you for making the time to kick off this session with us, and goodbye for now. I would like to hear from all of you in the audience, based on your own experience and all of what you've done around data. I'm curious to know what you believe is the most important driver of promoting a data-driven innovation culture in Africa. So you'll see a Zoom poll on your screen right now with 4 different options that you can select. Of course, all of these are important in some way, but we're asking you to pick what is the one that you believe is the most important driver. take a minute to do that. We will come back to the poll results in about 15 minutes and reflect on them. But for now, I'd like to jump into our panel conversation with three exciting guests who have joined us today to really explore the current landscape of data-driven innovation in Africa a bit further. So let me introduce our three panelists. Firstly, Ms. Bola Adesola, joining us from Nigeria. She's the Senior Vice Chairman for Africa at Standard Chartered Bank, and she's previously held a range of senior leadership roles at Standard Chartered in Nigeria and West Africa, at First Bank of Nigeria, Kakawa Discount House Nigeria, and Citibank in Nigeria and Tanzania. Mr. Shakib Ashur, joining us from Morocco. He's the Director of Marketing Strategy of Huawei in Morocco. He specializes in corporate communication and various ICT and technology themes, including network infrastructure, cloud computing, and big data. And then Mr. James Gabriel Claude, who's the CEO of Global Voice Group. He's been an active driver of their international expansion and product diversification strategy for over 13 years and has led many aspects of their technology strategy and technology products, wearing a CTO hat as well. So welcome to all of our panelists. And let me jump in with the first question. Bola, I would like to ask you this one. So at Standard Chartered, clearly as a bank, you have a lot of data, right? And you use data in many ways, including to design banking products for clients and also think about ways to reach those who are not yet customers, who are not yet banked. Can you share a little bit more about how you actually use data, data analytics, and other data technologies to inspire new product ideas?
Thank you very much, Ravi. And Adam is not on the screen, but I think he sort of set the stage for the issues and challenges around and suggested solutions around data-driven transformation. Now, as a bank, and he also referred to the fact that financial services probably has gone further than many industries in terms of data and innovation from data, particularly in Africa. As a bank, we're in the service industry, so we have clients, and just by the sheer volume of transactions that we do, obviously banks gather a significant amount of data. And for Standard Chartered is a full service commercial bank with a significant retail business across the continent. So what we look at is both internal and external data. So obviously we have a lot of internal data, customer transactions, their profile, and so on and so forth. But more importantly, recently is using external data to drive new products, to drive customer offerings. But the starting point is, who is the customer? Where is the customer? What does the customer do? What is his lifestyle? What is he spending money on? And so on and so forth. And so the external data comes from various sources. So in terms of, say, where our branches will be so that we can actually also serve our customers, we use geospatial data. And, I've been in the bank for the past 10 years, and I've seen us increase the number of branches, reduce the number of branches, consolidate, and so on, as a result of the data that we get on our customers, the mobility of our customers and who they are. The other types of data that we use to drive, to know more about our customers in terms of products also is their mobile transactions. So there's access to SMS alerts, for example, for customers. So are they receiving credits? Is it debits? Are they transferring money? And that helps us determine, for example, consumer spending power. And if they're buying airtime, then it means they have income, which they could use to pay back credit. So it helps us design credit products. In fact, in Kenya, we have we launched a mobile smartphone-based loan product, and also investment products where our clients, but these are targeted because we have data. from them. And similarly in Cote d'Ivoire as well, we've launched a sort of micro insurance product because we've been able to get data on our clients. So those are just some of them. Internally, for example, on anti-money laundering, we use data, we use external data, which then with AI modeling, tells us, who is high risk and who isn't. Of course, that's not the only determinant, but it's part of it. So we looked at their LinkedIn profiles, look at their Facebook profiles, and so on and so forth. And all this data gathering helps us, in determining sometimes the credit worthiness of the customer as part of the input, and some of it in terms of, what sort of business they're doing. So for us, it's really about curating the information that we have. We'll never have enough, but whatever we have, the key thing is making intelligent deductions, both on a lag basis and on a predictive basis as to the changing needs of our customers. We also invested, for example, in our fintech. And I'll talk a bit more maybe later on about some of our sort of business investing through a unit that is within the bank. But in terms of credit decisioning, a company called Instabase, which helps and again is driven by data. So as a bank, we encourage ideation both internally and externally. We use a sort of test and learn process. So we're testing different sort of theories all the time, but don't go too deep into it. And going back to what Adan had said, it's sort of an enterprise agility model that's throwing up, what we could try, what may work, but it's all customer centric. It's around improving the experience and the offerings to our clients. So those are just some examples of what we're doing across the continent.
Great, thank you for sharing, Bola. And it's really fascinating to just hear how the financial services sector has evolved so much. Like the new types of data sets that you're thinking about, geospatial data, more mobile transaction data, using that to feed AI algorithms. I think there's a lot for us to unpack there. But I'm going to first continue going around to hear some perspectives from each of the panelists. Shakib, I'd like to hear from you next. I know that Huawei, you're thinking about data from the perspective of the data infrastructure and the capacity that's available. I know you've been improving the capacity of data centers in Africa through various investments you've been making in South Africa and other locations. Can you share a bit more about, what you've been doing and what are you learning from, investing in these types of data capacity building and data infrastructure projects?
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Thanks to everybody, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to present Huawei on this panel discussion. So let me just to make the introduction, what Huawei is doing on ICT and what Huawei is doing in an ecosystem. And then I will share with you some use case investment that we did in Africa in building data center and cloud computing, including public cloud. First, for us at Huawei, is the key innovation enable a full connected intelligent world. We are building a full connected intelligent world to bring a digital to every organization, enterprise, and the citizen. But now, how to bring digital? This is very important question. So how to bring the digital to every organization, to citizen? So first, we need to collect the data. We need to transfer the data to the data center, including computer, storage, then process the data by using cloud computing technology, big data, and artificial intelligence. And finally, to make exploitation of this data using our Huawei ecosystem in order to deliver some smart services like eGov, health, education. Now, if you look of the concept, the strategy of Huawei, so our vision is to have this approach based on 3 dimensions. For us, all sensing, all connected, and all intelligent. Today in intelligent society today, the perception for everything connected, of everything, and intelligent of everything. So today, we need to collect the data. We need to use the network to transfer the data. And then after that, we use the big data and artificial intelligence for the exploitation of the data. As you can see here, on this part, the ICT infrastructure is the foundation of the smart world. But when we talk about ICT here, of course, we need to complete the ICT infrastructure by the ecosystem. So Huawei knows the importance of the ecosystem and has invested in building ecosystem for a different product line and industry. So we developed 3 ecosystems. The first ecosystem is the Cloud OS Fusion Sphere. We started this ecosystem in 2016. So Huawei contribution now is ranking number 2 in OpenStack. OpenStack is an open community to develop the cloud services, use open source. The second ecosystem that we developed is Harmony OS for the mobile services. And this initiative started last year. Huawei is investing $1 billion. And the third ecosystem that we are developing today is what we called Copen ARM-based processor server. We started this program in 2020 in order to build ecosystem for the IT. So as you can see here, our focus is to provide ICT infrastructure robust and open with ecosystem to make some use case happening with customer. So now back to Africa very quickly. First, we have a representative office of each of Africa country. We have today more than 9,000 employees in Africa. 75% of those employees are Africans. So our DNA, our heart is here in Africa. So if we go now to some use case, of course, we launched last year the first public cloud in South of Africa. This public cloud now is running in South Africa, and we are providing some services in South Africa and other countries. This is the first South Africa-based cloud and artificial intelligence innovation center to drive the knowledge transfer and economic growth through the application development on the AI industry. Huawei aims building intelligence Africa. So this public cloud now is available in South Africa, and we are providing services in South Africa and other countries. Of course, we build other data centers. For example, in Cameroon, we work with Gantel. Gantel is the first telecom operator in Cameroon with the government, and we put here data center facilities to cover 3,000 meters square dedicated to the project NBN National Broadband Phase 2. But also we developed another data center for government in Cameroon for the video surveillance and also firefighting system. And today we are also part of the program that's launched by Kenya. This ambitious program is called the Kenzo Technology City. It's including national data center, smart ICT, smart city, and the government cloud for enterprise services. And finally, let me just finish with the 2 use cases that we also developed in Morocco. We launched on 2018 the first cloud here in Morocco. It's B2B cloud with one partner of the 3 operators in Morocco. This is the first sovereign cloud in Morocco and in North Africa. This cloud now is running. We have more than 55 customers in Morocco using this cloud. And also, Madame Bola, she talked about the financial and the bank system. We have also this initiative to develop the fintech industry. 2 months ago, Huawei signed a big collaboration with one of the biggest bank in Africa called Banque Populaire BCP to develop the first digital bank in Africa. So this is just my introduction and overview to explain you what we are doing in terms of the ICT ecosystem and what we are building in terms of data center in Morocco, in Africa in general.
Thank you, Shakib. I know there's a number of really interesting initiatives that you're exploring there. I think some of the country level cloud ecosystems that you're developing and the whole ecosystem model of service provision, I think is really interesting to explore further. So let's come back and dive into those a bit more deeply later on. But want to turn it to James to get your perspective. So I know your work requires, or involves a lot of analysis of big data to help governments make data-driven policy decisions. Could you share, maybe one or two specific examples of how you've helped governments do this? Curious to understand, like, what are the types of policy recommendations or decisions that have emerged through your work that you are most excited about or proud about?
Thank you, Javi, for having me. I'd like to start by quoting an Israeli academic, Yuval Noah Harari. The other day he said, if you want to make a country a colony, don't send the text in, just get the data out. I think it's a powerful quote that tells us the importance of data overall, the strategic value of data. We all know that in terms of value, data surpasses the value of all. So it's a strategic asset for many governments. So I think all the stakeholders, not only the private sector that are building infrastructures, not only the ones that are making sense out of different data sets they have, I think government institutions, regulatory bodies, they have a special role that they have to play in order to create the right environment where data can be used in order to promote the development of ICT in general, the development of the digital economy. Going back to your question, I would say that I'm very privileged and fortunate to work, to run a company which has been pioneer in using big data in general to help government agencies to oversee what is happening in their respective sectors. One example I can give you, I remember in 2013, in Tanzania, mobile money started to be widely used, where more than 11 million people were using mobile money. But the central bank and the telecom regulators, they were facing this challenge. How do we oversee these new system where the velocity of transaction is quite high? And so we came up with a solution where we were the first one to put in place the regulatory technology platform that collect data directly from different service providers and allow the central bank to be able to get into those data and understand whether the AML rules are being followed, whether the CTF rules are being followed. So that's a typical example that have been replicated in many other countries where we work. And also not only in the financial sectors, but in the telecom sectors, because in the past, regulatory bodies, they came up with regulatory frameworks, they put in place regulation. How can you be sure today, with technologies moving so fast, that the policy you have set is the right one? So these are the kind of questions we asked. We help the regulatory bodies, especially the telecom regulators, the central banks, the revenue authorities. We help them to answer those questions by crunching data. So we are fortunate to be on both sides by using the big data itself, but also by helping them to frame the right policy for the development of ICT in general, and especially also the use of big data.
Great, thank you, James. And I actually would like to go for a round of follow-up questions with each of you, if we can keep this relatively quick. So 1 minute per answer. But James, just building on the point that you just mentioned, if you look ahead, like, what do you feel still needs to be done in the context of improving data infrastructure, or the available or access to relevant data, or the right analytics around that data? What still needs to be done for you to better assist governments across the continent along the lines of what you've just described?
The fact is, today, Africa represents 17% of the world's population, but there's only 1% of data center available in Africa. So when I speak with policymakers, when I speak with ministers, I understand they have a lot of concerns, especially when it comes to data sovereignty. So we need to make sure that we keep data in Africa. But I think there is a clear need to invest in infrastructure, so where we can keep those data. I think people are very concerned about the privacy of the data they are generating, because ultimately, who does generate those data is you, it's me, it's us all using our mobile phones. We are the ones generating those data. Now, what is happening, they are outside of the continent, they are sitting in data centers all over the world. and a group of guys from California are making a lot of data crunching and then selling back products to us. So I think that there needs to be, as I said, where all the stakeholders in Africa needs to work together to invest more in infrastructure, to invest more in literacy by putting in place programs at different universities where our young students can really learn about how big data can be used and technology in general, not only big data. I think also the regulatory bodies needs to be able to set the right policies and to create the right environment to develop the whole ecosystem. Because what usually happens is like, today, technology is moving very fast. In certain countries, they are still regulating using concept or regulation that are 60 years old. That cannot work. So I think, and then big data can be helpful in solving that solution by gathering most information, the most data you can get from the different systems. This way you can see whether this policy is working or not. So I think it requires works from different angles, from different stakeholders. But the last thing I'd like to add is, I think if we work together as a continent, that's why I really appreciate and encourage initiatives such as a Smart Africa Alliance, where different countries can work together to create a block, this way to harmonize different set of policies that can really be looked at as a continental level. Because GDPR in Europe, for example, has been a success because when you have 28 countries create a big market, it's easy now to speak by one voice. I think Africa can do the same. So this is the kind of initiative that I think we should be looking. This way you can benefit, that can benefit all the stakeholders, especially the population.
Great, thank you, James. Shakib, I'm wondering if you could build on some of those points. I know, James, you brought up a number of very interesting themes around infrastructure, education, the regulatory environment, the policy blocks. But Shakib, from your perspective, as you think about scaling data capacity across the continent, are there any additional ideas that you feel would allow you to kind of scale that capacity or infrastructure to new countries? If you could just take a minute or so to share anything new you may have in mind.
Yeah, sure. Today, when you talk about the digital economy, it's just something new because this digital economy is already ongoing in many countries across the world, including Africa. So today, how to collect the data is very important. Okay, but from outside, from Huawei side, we have experience how to make the execution, the plan execution for the digitalization of the country level. So we put it in place such like, for example, a framework. It's a concept. It's like a house, and in this house we need, of course, what we call the facilitator. So because before to build this the house, we need to have, for example, for this digital transformation, we need, of course, the talent, we need the ecosystem, we need the regulation, and the data is key. For example, when we collect the data, how to share the data between the different administrations, how to share the data between different ministries. This is the key problem. And this is where the law and the regulation are very, very important. We have a several case in Africa where we worked with some government and we make it happen. So later maybe I will share with you the case of Capo Verde. It's very, very important case because by using this methodology and making the exploitation of the data, they are offering some services for telemedicine, education, and e-government.
Great, thank you. And then Bola, maybe to bring it back to where you started. I know, where there's many of these themes around ecosystems and how we really think about collaboration and sharing and creating the right country level data environments and cultures. But at its core, we're often just thinking about how can we make money from data? How can we have the impact we're looking for? How could we ensure that new ideas are commercially viable or profitable? This is such a burning question that drives so many of these other data topics. So wondering how, from your perspective, how do you ensure that these new ideas that you're thinking about that are data inspired are truly viable and profitable, and commercially sound?
Thank you very much, Ravi. As I'd explained earlier or touched on, with Standard Chartered, we look at technology as being integral to our business. And we also look at data as being the fuel for our business. And so a few years ago, we set up a business enterprise within the bank called SC Ventures. And basically SC Ventures is an investment business that we set up to address the business problems with a digital mindset, both for internal and external. And very quickly, we do it in three ways. One is to have a hub of ideas, external ideas, internal ideas. So for Africa, we have an accelerator hub in Nairobi. So SC Ventures is global, but given the fast pace of growth of technology and technology platforms, we now have a hub in Africa. So there's the innovation hub. The second one is that we invest in validated fintech ideas. Okay, I think I shared one earlier. We've also just set up a business banking as a service called Nexus. So Nexus is sort of API based, and we partner with third parties to provide sort of white label banking services. Again, third parties who generate data, we generate data, and collaboratively, at the end of the day, the customer and the community is better off. The third thing that we do is to actually set up businesses ourselves using or driven by data. And I'll give an example of one very quickly. So we're looking at smart water meters, which we're piloting right now actually in Kenya. And just to tell you the thread of why such a venture around data can serve a significant ecosystem. So there was a lot of leakages and revenue losses from water provision. Now with smart meters, remotely, they know who's using water, when they're using the water, the demographics around who's using it. Now with that information, the company becomes much more efficient. Now apart from the efficiency, the data that is generated means that address verification and so on, data is available. That, especially in Africa where many places don't have addresses. So that sort of data, for example, can be shared with an Uber or a DHL and so on. For us as a bank as well, with information like that, we can also better structure our products to target those clients. So the chain from just a business that is to help manage water. The other things are, for example, in an estate. So you know how much water is going in, and you can reconcile what's going in and the aggregate that is used by the individual. So that's the type of sort of business that for us is driven by data and has significant ramifications. We're doing stuff in agric, for example, as well, to help farmers sort of from farm to kitchen. Okay, and all of it is kind of data driven for efficiency, for clients, financial inclusion, and so on. Generally, I think there's a lot in the payment space, but there's also a lot from a sort of core business and commercial venture. Now, of course, we have visibility. For every 10 ideas that come up, maybe one may take hold. But that's really what we do. But it's slow and steady. I don't think that it's like Adhan said, choose the unicorns and focus on them that will have the most impact and create for us as much influence as possible within the communities that we operate.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Bola, Shakib, and James, for all of your insights. I know we're just getting started and covering a lot of topics that we'd like to unpack further. But and in particular, I'm really interested in some of these more forward-looking ideas and recommendations, which I think will be relevant for a lot of the audience members, looking at some of the questions that are coming in and knowing about some of your backgrounds and organizations, and the data challenges that you're facing. I think there's some interesting areas we will explore further. But I first want to come back to the poll just to take a look at what we all thought. So it looks like there's the winning answer is essentially a workforce that is educated and skilled in data analysis, usage, and application, and the other ideas as well. all equally scored. So it's something for us to bring into, I think, our next conversation, just reflect on. I'm curious to hear from all of the panelists, your take on that. I'd like to switch focus for a bit and introduce you to our next guest, Mr. Ayotunde Coker. Or Dr. Ayotunde Coker. He is the Managing Director and CEO of RAC Center Limited and the Secretary General of the Africa Data Center Association. So over 30 years of international experience across Africa, Europe, the US, and Asia, including senior roles at Access Bank, Ford, Capgemini, Egg Bank, BP, a number of other organizations. Winner of the 2019 ICT Personality of the Year Award in Nigeria, amongst many other honors. Ayotunde, we're honored to have you with us today. I know you have many interesting perspectives on data and innovation. And we've just heard a number of really fascinating ideas and stories about how data can drive digital transformation. So I'm curious to get your perspective. Like, in your mind, what is the role of data in digital transformation? How do we start making sense of this topic?
Okay, thank you very much. Good day, everybody, and it really is an honor and a pleasure to be here. First of all, going back to the results of the poll, of course, we need trained human capital, and talked about sovereign data. If we don't have the infrastructure in place, there's nowhere to hold the data. We don't even have the data to develop the human capital. So everything really comes back to the fact that we need an underpinning infrastructure. There's a lot of transformation. So far, we talked about 1% of data center capacities in Africa, and as a percentage of global population. In fact, I think 4% of GDP, global GDP, is also from Africa. It's what I call the prosperity gap. And we need the kind of transformation with digital infrastructure to close that prosperity gap. I mean, the entire data center infrastructure capacity available in Africa, for instance, is only a quarter of what's available in just London. That's 1.3 billion people, and a quarter of what's in London. So there's a long way to go. With a lot of the examples that have been given by the panelists here, imagine if we didn't have the infrastructure here, you'd have to host in Europe and in the US, which is what's been done actually up to date. That has its own problems. First of all, your sovereign data is out, and James talked about, you take the data out. That's a good example. Two, the performance is just at the other end of the world, and it takes time for data to get there. And the real-time use of data increasingly is very important. I mean, you would hate it when you see things circling on your mobile phone or whatever, just because, and usually a lot of that is down to latency. And the other aspect of this is the fact that you have data sovereignty issues, right? So there are a variety of reasons why you need to have the infrastructure local to use. The thing about data as well is that even if you collect it, you have to host it somewhere. If you host it somewhere, that has to be reliable. It has to be up all of the time. And Chakib also talked about the ecosystem. So you now need the ecosystem of all of the carriers and all of the ISPs that you need to use to access the data. And the more we have in available data center infrastructure on the continent, the better it is for us to be able to underpin the demand for data and all of the usage scenarios that we've talked about. Now, South Africa has about 60% of data center infrastructure installation of the whole of Africa. So the rest of sub-Saharan Africa has a long way to go to catch up with South Africa in one way, but actually as well as the rest of the world.
Great, thanks for that. And I guess when you talk about data centers and local infrastructure and really ensuring that the concept of data sovereignty is actually accomplished or preserved, I'm curious to just get your take on what that actually means when you're when you're advising or helping companies think about using data centers and local data infrastructure? I imagine, companies, they're thinking about these types of decisions at different times based on their ability to invest, their maturity, their ambitions, et cetera. When is the right time, or what are the right conditions for companies to make these types of investments based on what you learned?
Well, the right time now is that they're at the very start of time, once you need to do something, because you have, by co-locating in commercially available data centers, you can really get your business going immediately. We've talked about the need for speed, innovation, rapid innovation. Bola talked about innovation hubs that they have to try things very, very quickly. Just imagine if you then have to go and build a data center. It takes 18 months to build a data center. You don't have the expertise. It consumes a huge amount of capital for the business. The capital that has to be put at the front end of the business to drive customer experience, to drive products and services to the customers. You see, in the old days when the whole idea of co-location, or the quality of co-location available was low, or either not available, it's understandable that you would want to build a data center. 10 years ago, as CI of a bank, I didn't have a choice. I built one, didn't want to. But now you have commercially available data centers. So the key thing right now, and the banks that start up, or oil and gas companies, or new companies that are SMEs, what they do straight away now is that they go and look for the right kind of quality data center infrastructure. They host their services there. They can get their businesses going, or if a bank could get innovation going, for instance, very, very quickly. One of the banks in Nigeria, the CEO was quite interviewed and said, one of the reasons I was able to transform the bank so quickly was because I outsourced my digital infrastructure to a very high quality data center. And he mentioned that as a real underpinning reason for his success. So I think the really smart CEOs now are challenging their infrastructure teams and saying, why, and capital isn't as available as it used to be. It absolutely has to be optimized. Your return on capital isn't in putting it on, as far as that business is concerned, dead infrastructure. But for the data center company, actually that is the core business. And they continue to innovate to deliver the right kind of services and infrastructure to support businesses. It's not just actually businesses, it's also cloud companies as well. Shakib talked about the cloud infrastructure and ecosystem they're building. So typically, a carrier neutral data center may be cloud neutral, to coin a term, which means you have lots of cloud companies that host there to deliver services to businesses. Some of them are just hosting for infrastructure. Some of them are actually applications that are already delivering very sophisticated functionality to businesses. Some come with artificial intelligence, and so on. And as you collect all of this data that we've been talking about, they actually, build up to a huge amount. And that's where the term big data comes from. So it's one thing to collect the data, right? You stick it somewhere where you can host it, make it available reliably, and so on, scalable. It's another thing to do the analytics on the data. And I think when you've heard about TikTok and they talk about the algorithm, well, that algorithm is doing something with the data that makes it really, really valuable, that turns it into insight and knowledge that then becomes what you really, really use. Could you imagine at a point in time, just when you want to use that data, it all goes down? Usually, actually, it might be that some network goes off somewhere or the data center has gone down. And once that goes down, the entire value chain of networks and everything is absolutely down. Even if you were doing edutech and a whole range of things to educate the information, if you don't have the underlying infrastructure, it will not succeed. There's analysis that's shown globally that for every 10% of broadband penetration, you get an average of 1.5% uptick in GDP. Now, and that's on average. You know what averages say, it's an average. If you look at emerging economies, like we have in Africa, it's actually around about 2.5%. That's why there's been a lot of work on getting broadband penetration. It's gone so just over 30% in Nigeria now. The target is to get it to 40%. Once you get it to that level, the data volumes, the outreach to individuals of using the data, collecting the data, hosting the data, using the data increases significantly. And that's where you get the real benefits from and how it'll impact, you know, the human capital and so on. So I would actually offer an alternative to the poll you did, that if you don't have underlying infrastructure, quite everything else is a pipe dream.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing these perspectives. I really appreciate these points. I think what I would like to invite you to come back and join. I think shortly we'll be hearing some questions from the audience. But I do want to go back to some perspectives from our panelists. We've been talking quite a bit about the different key building blocks for data-driven innovation, the data infrastructure, the analytics, the technologies, et cetera. But recall some of the theme that we started with, right, was to truly drive transformation over time, we are going to need to think more deeply about what creates that right environment for experimentation, collaboration, sharing with data, whether it's across the private sector or private and public sector. And we've touched on a few themes already, but curious to dive a bit deeper. So I'll start by asking a question to you, Shakib, about you've talked a bit about Huawei's digital transformation framework that you use in different African countries. I know it's a pretty sophisticated framework and we don't have time to go deep into it here, but could you just elaborate a bit on, what are the parts of the framework that are most critical to ensuring that there is a strong collaboration or an opportunity for strong collaboration around data? If you could just keep it to a minute or two, your answer, appreciate that. Sorry, Shakib, I think you're on mute.
Okay. Sorry, as mentioned by Mr. Ayutander Coker, the infrastructure is very important, but also the talent. I mean, the question that you asked before to start this panel discussion, the questions are very important. The talent is very important to build this kind of digital transformation. So, I mean, the most important in this, the framework is like, as I said before, it's like a house. You need some facilitator. Of course, you need innovation, you need ecosystem, you need the talent, regulation. But the key, fundamental layer to build and to put in place this real digital transformation is ICT. So we need first to have a real broadband connectivity. If we talk about e-health, if you don't have very good connectivity, so the adoption will be very bad. The experience of citizen will be very bad. So the key fundamental point here is the connectivity. The connectivity today is very important. As we can see, even now during this pandemic period, without connectivity, we cannot do education, health, whatever. So the ACT, component is very important for this digital transformation. And when we talk about ACT, is connectivity, including mobile, fixed network, data center, cloud computing with IoT, cloud, big data, and artificial intelligence. This is the fundamental layer that we need to put in place. And of course, with the ecosystem, we can open the API and then we can deliver some smart services to the public services or vertical sector.
Great, thank you. Bola, I'm curious to understand some of these tensions and trade-offs and data interests a bit further. I know another one of the hats that you wear is as part of the board of trustees of the FinTech Association of Nigeria, and I'm curious to hear a bit around that that tension between how fintechs who are eager to innovate think about regulating or self-regulating. Or keeping ahead of or step ahead of regulation. Can you share some of the approaches to oversight or self-regulation that you've seen?
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, and I think the other speakers also touched on regulation, from different perspectives. I think in the beginning, many of these sort of technology companies, fintechs, and so on, at least certainly in our space, were just left to sort of run on their own. The regulators generally across Africa are facing sort of much bigger problems to do with financial system stability and so on and so forth. But when they've seen one or two instances where, due to weak governance, because many of the companies start off as one-man businesses, so to speak, and they found that there've been either losses or fraud or anti-money laundering or sanctions issues, they then stepped in. And so in Nigeria, for example, in Kenya, the central banks actually have regulations and policies and even issue licenses to some of the companies that gather data. But I think what's also important is that generally many countries already have sort of trade associations or ecosystems for players in the industry. So there's an Africa FinTech network, for example, that the FinTech Association of Nigeria is part of. And this is really to drive sort of self-regulation, to drive guidelines, to help with governance, to help them even with third-party agreement, just being there as a support structure to facilitate and strengthen the industries. One of the initiatives we have in Nigeria, for example, is called the Regulator Forum, which is meetings between regulators and innovators that we facilitate, so that we can actually get regulators thinking about what is around the corner, so that they're not playing lag and they're not sort of creating policies that are reactive, because sometimes policies are created around one incident, rather than looking at the ecosystem. So members of the FinTech Association in Nigeria are not just FinTech companies. They include regulators. We've got the SEC, for example, has regulations around FinTech in the capital market. They include telecoms companies and so on. Anybody who has an interest or sort of is a stakeholder in the industry. And so that eases the tension, because if you're engaging, if you're liaising, if you're providing thought leadership, then the likelihood of any tension is removed. And as you know, before I keep quiet, in most countries, regulators come in and then they slam everybody and say, well, nobody's going to operate in this business. Instead of us, going back to the old days of that, it's better for us as players in the industry to be proactive, to provide advice, and to make sure that stakeholders and players do not fall foul of regulations, and compliance and so on. So there's quite a bit happening in that space. I know that at least 35 countries have membership of the Africa, or some, are affiliated with the Africa FinTech. So that's progress. I think it's tremendous progress.
Great, thank you for that. James, I know this is a topic that is very dear to your heart as well, around thinking about how to inspire the right regulatory kind of environment and balance these different competing interests. Wondering if you have any perspectives that you can share from your work?
Yes, I'd like to add on top of what Madam Bola Adesola was saying. I think she's so right. Regulation can be an enabler, but most of the time it can come and slow down completely innovation. So I think if you look at, I think many regulators in Africa, especially central bank, they did well, especially when mobile money and M-Pesa type started, especially in East Africa. But if you look at the reaction of the Nigerian government, that maybe can explain why mobile money is so developed in East Africa as opposed to Nigeria, which is one of the biggest markets in Africa. So that's a typical example where the regulation can make a huge difference on the outcome of innovation or development of digital economy. But I have, based on my experience, I have seen where regulatory bodies and service providers collaborate with government institutions in order to create value. One example I can give you, I remember at the early stage of the pandemic, coronavirus in Africa, we worked with the telecom regulators, the Ministry of ICT. We as GVG Global Voice Group, we provided the know-how, but the data were coming from the mobile network operators, working directly with the telecom regulators. So in order to look at mobility data to assess the spread of the virus. So I think that was a very good example where considering the circumstances, they took the necessary measures to allow this collaboration to happen fast. And DVD, since we've been working with the government for so many years, we proposed the solution we were providing in order to create that value. And that really helped, not only in looking at the virus spread, but also contact tracing, because at the beginning, everyone was talking of Singapore, in Europe and in America about contact tracing. But what we did by going directly from the data sources, from the network elements, we're able to put in place a more effective contact tracing, taking into account the African realities, because in Africa, although the penetration of mobile phone is huge, but the smartphone using Bluetooth and so on is not that, the percentage is quite low. So if you try to import what has been done in Singapore, it's not that effective. But if you look at mobile money cash in, cash out, so for me to go and make a cash in, if you know that this person is infected, so you know for sure that it has been with this agent, which phone number is that one visible. So I think those are kind of initiatives that I'm very proud to be associated with the success. And also it gives you a clear example how different stakeholders can together work to make sure that they facilitate the development of certain kind of ICT initiatives, and not go into slow down and just interfere without proper knowledge of what is happening.
Great, thank you for that, James. I regret that I have to cut this conversation short, but we are running a bit short on time. We have about 15 minutes left, and I do want to make sure we have time to take some questions from our audience. I've seen a number of questions coming in across the chat function. We won't be able to cover all of them, but let's see if we can cover a good sampling of them. And I know, and I'm going to actually direct the first question to you, Bola. I know you have to catch a flight in very soon, so appreciate you making the time, and we want to make sure you get to the airport on time. But a first question, going back to one of the themes that you shared at the beginning. This is a question from Maximilian Koza. What role do you see geospatial data playing in various industries post-COVID? You talked about how it was such a useful data set for your type of product innovation. I wonder, based on your experience, if you could kind of extrapolate more broadly on the power of that particular data set.
Thank you very much. I think significant information, because like I said, we've used it before to determine, how to sort of map our physical presence in countries. But given the fact that the physical presence, even in the financial services sector, is diminishing with a smartphone, in one's hand, we're looking at not just geospatial data in terms of concentration of people, but other data that complements geospatial data in terms of, population, other demographic data. If you look at the, James referred just now to issues around, say, mobility, in relation to the health crisis. But if you also look at mobility in terms of urbanization, I was talking to a commissioner in Lagos State in Nigeria just a few days ago, and he said every single day, 90 new people come to live in Lagos. Okay, so they need to know where these people will be. How do they provide infrastructure and services to them? What are their spending habits? Can they, register as residents to enable planning from a sort of, social development perspective? If you also look at some other aspects of financial services, say insurance, for example, where are people concentrated? Are they artisans, or, are they blue collar workers? Are they white collar workers? Where do they migrate to during the day, and where do they come back to in the evening? What form of transportation? So planning even, for transport modes is also important. So I think that the impact on social services, on welfare is significant. And, I think COVID as a, Black Swan event has exposed, majorly issues around, development gaps, gender gaps, for example. How do we target women? How do we target children? So, I mean, I'm sure, we could all sort of give examples of how it would help, but those are just, thoughts around it. Whilst Mr. Coker is back, can I just touch on or make a point? I think there was a lot of emphasis on physical infrastructure in terms of data centers. And I'm wondering, when are we also in Africa going to sort of leapfrog for a sort of Afrocentric cloud-based data management? So for us in Kenya, for example, we've signed up with Microsoft Azure. We have a partnership with them because it gives us easy access. It's reliable. We have access to also analytical tools. That's such a big player, but there's no reason why we should do that when, Mr. Cook, I think you should be driving, an Africa sort of led cloud-based data. Physical infrastructure is neither here nor there, in the next 10, 15, 20 years. If everything is on your phone, then, the need for bricks and mortar is going to diminish. So I thought I should just challenge you as the Secretary General also of the Africa Data Centers that, bricks and mortar, hey, 20, 25 years, no banks will exist. It's going to be agnostic. It doesn't matter. You just walk into a building. You don't even need a building. Your phone is in your hand. So I thought I should just throw that in.
Yes.
Actually, if you don't mind, if you would maybe, if you would like to respond to that,
Yes.
and then we'll return to some of the other audience questions.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Okay, yes. You see, even when things sit on mobile phones, they have to sit, they sit somewhere that allow you to have that mobility. So all the big data and stuff like that sit somewhere, and it continues to grow significantly. And so even those cloud providers, the Microsofts you talk about, the Amazon Web Services you talk about, the Googles, actually also know that they have to host their data closer to the point of use. So you're starting to see them announce locations at different parts of Africa where they're having their footprint over here. And as the consumption grows in African data centers, and there are more data centers being built to house some of these international players for lots of different types of functionality. And Microsoft is also one you mentioned. At Rack Center, the company I run, we have quite a few local cloud providers, homegrown cloud providers. We have it as an ecosystem. In the early days, a few years ago, we actually incubated some of them that have now grown into good-sized companies. So you can actually, we have customers that patronize local data for use. We also talk about data sovereignty. The natural thing is to think that your data sovereignty is in just your country, okay? If you look at Europe, the data sovereignty is GDPR, is Europe-wide. The scale of the US, it's US-wide. So if we fragment this into just little bits of countries, we won't have this kind of economies of scale of data centers that will serve the continent effectively. And the scale of the continent is actually the fact that you have hubs emerging. South Africa has emerged as one hub where you get these cloud services. West Africa is one where, Nigeria being one scale anchor hub, one in Egypt, one emerging in Morocco. So we're having these hubs sort of emerging now. You have smaller locations, Ghana being one, and others coming in other parts of the country, just to the continent, just to have more efficient infrastructure. So we are having more infrastructure to support more cloud locally, both from homegrown cloud providers, and we need to increase that significantly. It's an opportunity for us. You'll also see other players that will come in, maybe Alibaba or some of these other platforms will come in, but we then have to mix that with some of the homegrown capacity and capability that we have. We certainly have the talent, and that's where that human capacity piece that came out in the survey comes in, that we do have the talent to build this and to deliver it as services. But there are also other macro things that have to be done. We have to make it easy to establish the infrastructure locally. We have to, if we apply huge customs duties to sophisticated technologies that we import, immediately we make our platforms in Africa uncompetitive by global standards. So we have to encourage the growth of the infrastructure of the broadband to enable consumption, and also encourage the talent that we have to deliver homegrown cloud services.
Great. Thank you.
It's happening, and we need to accelerate it.
Great. Thank you. I know this is a debate we can keep going for some time, but I do want to acknowledge some of the other questions that have come in from the audience. I'd like to direct a question, Shakib, to you. I think you have some interesting experiences that you'll be able to reflect on to answer this. This is from Jim Dando, Director of the Africa Data Networks at the Africa Automotive Data Network. And he is asking a question essentially about the automotive industry, which I think is perhaps a broader question we could reflect on. This particular industry, there's a company is struggling with the lack of OEM sales data, particularly in the informal sector. When you think about parallel or used vehicles, the information isn't available, and you'd think some of this could come from government vehicle registrations, but it's not. I think we can imagine, replace automotive with many other sectors where there's a strong informal economy or informal component with imperfect data or lack of data, and or a challenge in getting the right data from governments. So what are the approaches that you think could potentially be used to essentially generate this data or surface this data from governments so it can be used by innovators in the right way?
I think one of the big problems that we are facing here in Africa is the lack of talent. So this is why we can find many data centers, but there is no load on this data center. So let me maybe to make very concretely by illustration of one of the examples that we did in West Africa for the cloud-based data. So we did some work with the government of Cabo Verde. So the Cabo Verde, the purpose is to greatly improve the government office efficiency, promote the sharing education, medical care, and many type of resource to make Cabo Verde is very good level in terms of the informatization. So we did this project with Cabo Verde in two phases. The phase one, it was to put in place the data center in very short time. Of course, to build the real data center to collect the data based on the wireless and microwave. And also we put in place more than 20 telepresence video conference system to put the link between education, government, between health, and how to provide also the service to citizens. But in additional parts, we put in place what we call one cloud, one lake, and one platform. What is the one cloud? One cloud is a convergent resource pool, because the government needs to put in place this convergent resource pool. Those resource pool is pool for the computer, the storage are available for the government, are available for the enterprise, for any sector. And it can be managed by the digital agency authority. So this is the first one, what we did. And then we put in place the concept of what we call data lake. It's very complicated concept, but the data lake is how to aggregate the data. And then there is a platform, because when it comes to the data, you have to make sure how to share the data between different ministries. So we put in place, we worked with the government and the ecosystem, and we put in place this kind of platform. And then in the second phase, we offer the business continuity, because as we have the local data center in Cabo Verde, we have to ensure that there is a business continuity. We put in place one of the old data centers that we transformed on disaster recovery to make sure that we can ensure full business continuity for the services. And then now the service is available for the health, and also to develop also the IP network. The IP network is to make sure that, for example, for telemedicine application system, enable emergency patient to obtain better professional services from the capital medical team in timely manners. So in this case, I'm just sharing with you how we can better manage the data, but also how to collect the data by putting in place a robust network, but where the policy and the regulation are involved. And finally, what we did with the Cabo Verde government, we work with the NOSI, the digital agency authority, to develop different websites and different applications for the security, for automotive, for the health, and also to put in place some specific ERP. So now the services are available, and now we help this government to be as a hub in West Africa because this cloud data center is providing services to other countries. For example, Guinea Equatorial, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, etc. So this is a real example where we worked with the Cabo Verde to make it happen. But the key point is to need the policy and the regulation to be there to make sure how we can manage the data lake and to provide the data in the right way.
Great, thank you for sharing, Shakib. Bola, I know you have to head off to the airport. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your insights and experiences with us. I know this was really helpful and insightful.
Truly a pleasure. I'm so sorry that I have to leave now, but I found this very insightful, educative, and I appreciate being invited to be on such a distinguished panel. Thank you. Nice meeting you, James. Nice meeting you, Shakib. Thank you very much, Ravi. Ayotunde, we'll meet on the physical data center or not. Bye-bye.
Great. We're almost at the end of our time. I just want one more audience question I want to direct to James. This is a question from Rotenda Takalani. Are there legislations and laws that are preventing data-driven innovation from happening more rapidly? Right? Like what is it at the policy level that is holding us back, and how can we actually change those? Can you share any reflections on that question?
I think it will be unfair to say to just shift over the regulation part where we stand today, the current situation in Africa. As I said earlier, I think regulation has a role to play. Regulation can slow down the innovative aspect of different ICT solutions, but at the same time, they can enable it. So what I think we should be doing, especially in Africa, and is to follow the example of Rwanda. In 2020, in January 2020, they issued a new regulation about data, about the use of data. Any company that want to do business in Rwanda today, depending on, you need to comply with that regulation. I think that will go in the same direction of what Dr. Coker was saying. It will incentive the creation of data centers so they can host data locally. I think regulation like that should be looked at a continental level, so we can create the critical mass, we can create the size of the market that can influence the kind of data set to be managed locally. So I think that will also help in the data sovereignty. What I'd like to add on the regulation aspect, most of the time, not because the regulators, their purpose is just to slow down innovation, but sometimes they don't have the adequate tools to do so. So today, I think there's no excuse for the regulator to come and impose certain regulations and without the means to follow how impactful is certain policies. So I think that's why I'd like to add at the end, we as GVG, we've been working with many regulators in Africa. I'm very proud to say that we have assisted more than 12 regulators, telecom regulators and central banks in different areas in East Africa, in West Africa. So they can have the tools, the ICT tools, to be able to track the impact of different policies. So today, I think that's the way regulation should be seen, a very kind of dynamic regulation that can evolve and not being like a barrier for growth or for the development of ICT in general.
Great, thank you. I do have to bring today's webinar to a close. I would like to thank all of our participants today, Adam, Ayotunde, Bola, Shakib, and James, for their insights, for their ideas. I'd like to thank all of you in the audience for your questions, for your engagement. I'm really sorry that we aren't able to answer all of the questions. There are so many of them, but obviously a big topic and so much to explore further. We've covered a lot of ground today, data-driven product innovation, data centers, capacity, regulation, policy, customer protection, data sharing, data collaboration. I know for me, most importantly, I heard some real examples of success that could be a model for how we think about scaling and promoting more data-driven innovation across the continent in countries that are at all stages of their digital transformation journey. Please join us for the next webinar of this series, the third webinar, which will be held on October 22nd. The topic is Delivering a Broadband Africa. It will be a deep dive into topics related to infrastructure and connectivity, and it will pick up on some of the themes that we already started discussing today. We look forward to seeing you again, and thank you very much.